Hey everyone, Courtney here, your plaid-clad librarian, coming to you for the next video in our storytelling series. So today we are going to talk about what makes a story, what counts as a story, and that can be a whole slew of things, and I'm going to pretty much go over a bunch of examples that will hopefully inspire you and make you feel more confident in being able to tell your own story in your own way. One of the storytelling options available to you is writing. It is probably the most popular way of telling stories. Generally, when somebody thinks of a story, they think of a book. And yeah, that's definitely an option. I mean, you can have a whole slew of different types of books available to you. For instance, like The Martian, which is a novel by Andy Weir, and probably one of my favorite books I've ever read. And this is just a standalone title. There's only one book in this. However, you also have How to Train Your Dragon series, which is 12 books by Cressida Cowell, and I absolutely love those too. But that's vastly different from a single standalone book to a series. And the way that you write those books and those series is going to be different in how you approach and how you write. So if that's your end goal, that's something that you need to accommodate for when you're starting your project. But books are kind of like a high bar thing. That's a lot of work and there's a lot of effort that goes into that. And maybe you're not ready to make a book/series commitment. And that's totally fine. So there's other things that you can do specifically with written word. For instance, you can have, this is The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes. It is a pretty hefty book. However, I have probably about 7 different copies of Sherlock Holmes stories because they're not really book size. This is a collection of short stories. So this is considered his greatest cases, and in this, there are over 20 stories in this book alone. Each one of these short stories is significantly smaller. Consider it like a bite-sized book. And a short story has its own challenges when you're writing it because you're not relying on an entire narrative within a full book. It has to be shorter and you have to get to the point faster. Now, the library has a lot of really good collections of short stories, and if you ever want to read them, they are totally available for you. We have them, and I urge you to check them out. You can get some amazing short stories from really great authors, and they're all piled together, so you don't even have to go hunting pecking for them. They're all in one group. Now, there's other things that you can do other than short stories and such. You can also, maybe you love poetry, write some poetry. I have seen novels written in poetry, that they're called verse novels, but also there's beautiful collections of poems or even just a standalone poem. That is a mode of writing that you can write. And there's also this really cool thing called 2-sentence horror stories that I found. And these are basically just exactly what they are. It's kind of a hashtag online. You can look up 2-sentence horror stories and see a whole list of all these like creepy little idea stories that are literally 2 sentences. For instance, one of them is, you hear your mom call you into the kitchen, and as you go down the stairs, you hear a voice whisper from the closet saying, "Don't go, honey. I heard it too." Like, story. That was a story. And you can write something so simple and something so small and still accomplish a story. It does not matter if it is a 12-part series or if it's 2 sentences. You can tell a story. All right, now shifting down the line, we are getting into comics. This is another great way to tell stories. It's a beautiful combination of words and art, and it is one of my favorite ways of reading. I own a lot of comics personally, and a lot of graphic novels. So let's go over different kinds of comics and graphic novels that are available. So for instance, you can have a traditional comic, which is just a comic book. You can have anywhere between like a 15-page comic, or you can have a bound comic, which is several issues bound together into a larger book. But you don't even have to stop there or even start there. For instance, Strange Planet by Nathan Pyle is a hysterical little collection of 1 to 2 to 4 panel comics. And for instance, this is just a 2-panel comic right here. 1, 2. And right here it tells a little story, and that's valid. Whereas you have other ones where it's 4 panels. It tells a story, and that's valid. You don't have to have a long, winding story written out. It doesn't have to be hundreds of pages long to be worthwhile. This is an incredibly popular comic series now. It has a lot of followers on Facebook and Instagram, and they're really, really funny. And he does well with just these little short comics. So yes, there's those. There's comic books. There's also graphic novels like Nimona here. Nimona is written by Noelle Stevenson, and it is an absolute joy. It tells the story of this girl, Nimona, who's really, her dream in life is to be the perfect henchman. And she's just got such a good voice to her. And this is a graphic novel that is full length. It's a full story, and it's available to you. This is also translated into an audiobook. Now, if you ever wondered how on earth do you take a graphic novel and make it into an audiobook, check it out. The library has this available for you to listen to. I highly recommend it. It is a small read. It goes by pretty quickly. I think the audiobook is no more than 5 hours. It's less than that. And it's so much fun. So check that out and see how a graphic novel can work for a story. A long graphic novel or a short comic, they're both stories and they're both valid. There's also this really cool thing called a hybrid book, like Odd and the Frost Giants. This is done by Neil Gaiman and Chris Riddell. And this is a combination of, you have traditional story, written story, and then these big sweeping illustrations. And the two blend together really nicely. So if you like a more traditional story, but you're also wanting to contribute with some really big art pieces, you can do a hybrid piece as well. If film is more your thing and you're thinking, oh man, a full-length feature film, that's a lot of work, and I'm not quite sure that I'm ready for it. You don't have to be. I mean, right now, TikToks are absolutely taking over the world. And TikToks are like 15 seconds long or a minute long at most. And if you follow the hashtag Storytime on TikTok, you can see the ways that people have managed to tell wonderful and amazing and hilarious stories in the span of just a minute. It's so quick and so fast, and the way that people pull it off is amazing. YouTube is another place where people are able to make films and put them online. And I mean, I've watched YouTube videos that are 30 seconds long, and I've watched ones that are like 30 minutes long. Every single video, doesn't matter how long they are, they're valid. Those are all stories. And that's why we watch them, and that's why we are entertained by them. There's also this thing called short films. They are not feature-length films. They can be any amount of time. If you've watched the Pixar shorts, those are short films. And they're really quite fun and enjoyable to watch. And there's short film festivals that are being held around all year long. And it's a great way to kind of make something in a shorter format that's, more bite-sized and available to you and what you want to make. If you're an artist and you're looking to tell stories with your art, all of your art is valid. I have seen some of the most beautiful sketches that just kind of convey emotion and a story within a sketch. Storyboarding is something that filmmakers and artists and comic artists use in order to kind of like outline a story. There's also different ways of making your art. You can have a canvas that is just this big and that's what you're working with, or you can have a full-blown mural. All of those pieces of art are completely valid and they are still worth the story that you're putting into it. And if we're talking about orally, telling a story verbally, mouth to ears, there's a lot of different options that you can do too. I mean, comedians tell jokes, and it could be anything between a knock-knock joke to like a full-length story and like a comedian's show. There's the stories that we just tell each other when we're hanging out with friends and family, and then catching up, telling people what's going on with your day, and just seeing how things are. There's also folktales. These are kind of stories. I think everybody has a story that they remember being told when they were a child. And everybody's family has different kinds of stories. It might be stories about things that happened to other family members when they were little, or folk tales that, are popular and that a lot of people know, or just your own family knows. For instance, I was raised on stories like The Three Little Pigs and Goldilocks and Little Red Riding Hood. You might have been raised on different stories than that, but those are what I was told. And I'll probably pass them along to my nieces and nephews, and they'll also share that story with their family too. But stories, even when you're talking, don't even need to be made up. They can be about real things. For instance, you can be listening to a speech or a TED Talk where somebody is talking about how their experiences with autism or ADHD. You can listen to podcasts. There are some entertainment podcasts where it is made up, but there's a lot that are true, factual. For instance, one of my favorite podcasts right now is called Black Box Down, which is like a true crime podcast about aviation incidents and disasters. One of my favorite things about this podcast is the way that they frame the information into a story, explaining how it happened, what happened in the incident, and then what was done about it afterwards. I think it's really interesting, and it's a way where they're able to weave a narrative with the real information available to you. So when you are looking at your story and thinking, oh, I want to do this sort of thing, consider what you want your outcome to be. Do you want a book, or do you just want like a 2-second story? Both are good. Stories are great in every format. Some people want to dive into a universe that is going to keep them engaged for hours and hours and hours. You have video games that offer hundreds of hours like Skyrim and Persona. And then there's video games like Journey, where you can probably finish that story in about an hour, and it is one of the most pungent stories that I've ever played. So consider what you want to do. And don't be daunted or pressured into making a story that you don't want to make. It's not a competition, it's a story. Unless you're entering a story competition, in which case, then that's a competition, but details. So that's it for this video. Tune in next time where we're going to talk about how to start your story, how to get going. And hopefully this has been helpful to you. If you have any ideas of what kinds of stories that you want to share, please leave comments down below, and I would love to see what you have done, or even just seen a little bit of progress. Some of these things can take us 5 minutes, or they could take us 5 years. I've been working on writing my own stories for much over 10 years, and I'm still working on them. Some of them are done, some are not. That's okay. If you have any other ideas, the types of stories that you would like to share, or even just some good story recommendations that you want to share with other people, let us know. Comment on the post below and we'll see what we can do. Alright, so now time for story prompt time. Again, you can make this as complex or as simple as you want. It can be as short or as long as you want, and it can be in whatever format that you want. I would again love to see the results of this. So if you want, you can share it with the Addison Public Library. And if you're willing, we would like to be able to share it with everybody else too. But for now, your prompt is to tell the story of the time that a mysterious object was discovered. Okay. So with that, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and see you later. Bye-bye.